Hello and welcome to Dental Education Podcast, the podcast series where we share knowledge and experience to provide value to you and your dental practice. I'm your host, Phil Cole, and in today's episode, this is going to be a good one. We'll be talking about building your team through recruitment and the right way to do it. And I am joined by Dr. Michael Neal, founder and CEO of Build My Team, and he's going to be sharing his thoughts. So, Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you and your listeners today.
Yeah, this is a huge topic. I was so glad that we were able to connect because being an optometrist, as you said, you were or are the dental community as well is always talking about hiring. It's probably what I would say probably our top three things that we get asked on is, do you have a good hiring company, stuff like that. So give us a little insight then on how you got started on all this.
Well, first of all, you got to ask yourself as a dentist, what the heck is an eye doctor doing on a dental podcast, right? So let's get that elephant out of the way. I've learned a tremendous amount from dentistry to improve my own practice. I find that looking internally to eye care, you get limited to what eye care can provide. And I'm hoping that our discussion today can help the dental listeners in reverse with what a different approach can provide. So this all started with back in about 2017, 2016 with my own practice. We were having all kinds of problems hiring. You name it, we had the problems. And I started to get really frustrated, took a look at why is this happening? Why do we constantly have problems in our practice with hiring? What's going on? We were looking at resumes, we're trying to make the best decision based upon the resumes and just consistently not good at it. It would seem anyway. And so what ended up happening is I started executive coaching through a company called Strategic Coach, which was wonderful. And we took a look at how these different companies were hiring. That was one of the kind of offshoots of it. Looked at the Four Seasons, Disney, Ritz-Carlton, all of these companies that provide mind-blowing service and customer guest experiences. What I realized after getting a little bit under the hood is that they're not hiring the same way that our practices all are. So your dental practice, my eye care practice, Build My Team is in 9 different healthcare professions. And what we found is that we're all basically doing it wrong by looking at resumes. Now, when I say doing it wrong, get a lot of people rolling their eyes. Well, how else are you going to do it, right? Well, guess what? There's a different approach. What we built over a couple of years was an automated system which uses assessments. There's a field called psychometrics, which can determine what a person's good at. Not by asking them directly, of course, because a person would be good at everything. That's the purpose of a resume. No matter what goes on in this interview, Doc, I'm fantastic, right? So what we do instead is we created an automated process that ended up being a full service end-to-end hiring solution for practices. So what Build My Team does is it has a consultation call with a dentist or the owner and talks with them about what's going on in the practice. We write the job description for the practice, publish it out to all kinds of job boards, over 20 different job boards. And the reason we do that is to get the maximum number of candidates to apply for the job. The reason being is we are going to reject almost all of them. Instead of trying to select the best candidate, now follow me on this one, this is a little odd, we're rejecting almost everybody. And the ones that are left over are by definition the best candidates. The reason that works so well is we start off by measuring their, and this is all done via text message, by the way. As soon as they apply for a job, within 5 seconds, their cell phone beeps. And they get a text message asking them to start these assessments. Now, for any of your listeners, my first tip right off the bat is if you aren't using text messaging in your hiring process, you are missing out. You're missing the boat. Candidates, especially younger candidates, aren't using email. All of them will tell you they do, but what they're not telling you is they'll check their email maybe once or twice a week if you're lucky. Okay, That's how bad it was. And that's why we actually built an email system for this and had to shelve it and spend a couple months developing our text-based automation in order to make this work. So they get the the link for the assessments, they start out on the assessment process. And what we're determining is their natural strength and talent set. So, what is this person going to bring to your practice without even trying? What are they naturally good at? And big picture, when you put a person who's naturally good at something into a position where you're asking them to use those natural strengths and talents all day long, guess what? They're fantastic at it. And the best part is they don't even think that this is special. They're just getting up in the morning, rolling into your practice, and being themselves all day long. And it brings a special type of magic productivity to the position that it's hard to believe until you see it in action. So our build my team approach is if I back up a little bit, the first thing we measure is if they have a healthcare mindset or not. This is very crucial because if they're not interested in serving others, helping people, etc., then they're not going to be a good fit for healthcare, period. It doesn't matter if they're in your practice or mine. The next thing we measure is their speed of learning. They can't be too smart. They don't stay in your practice. And on the other hand, if they don't learn quickly enough, you're going to be teaching them the same thing over and over again. We have a sweet spot. And the people that we bring to our clients are very intelligent. They can learn extremely quickly. And that means you're not going to spend much time training them. It also means that they can come from outside the dental profession, and voila, you've got an incredible A player on your team that learns super quickly, doesn't take very long to train at all, and is super appreciative because you just gave them a whole new opportunity. So from there, we also measure things like critical performance factors. Believe it or not, this is all predictable. Try and get this out of an interview, by the way. Are they warm and friendly with patients? Do they follow procedures and policies consistently? Can they handle details and paperwork? Are they bored by extended routine, or can they handle extended routine? Guess what we do in dentistry all day long? It's very, very similar stuff over and over, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't matter what you ask them in an interview. Of course, they can handle all that stuff. But the reality is, most of them can't. Most of the candidates can't. So what happens when they get into your dental practice and all of a sudden they're doing things differently, one patient to another? That's chaos, and we've all seen it happen, and it's brutal. We're also asking them if they can follow up, or we're determining if they're able to follow up or if they have incomplete follow up. As a dentist, you're asking your team to do something. Do you immediately stop and jot that on a post-it note in your pocket and check with them at the end of the day to make sure every little thing was done? Of course not. We immediately assume that they're going to execute because they have strong follow-up skills. So we make sure that's the case. We're also looking for things like this is basically a magic bullet. How do they handle stress? Now, in an interview, you can ask 100 people if they handle stress well. You will get 99 answers saying that they handle stress well.
Yeah.
One person will actually be truthful.
Yeah.
With our approach, some people handle stress well. It's a continuum. Some people don't. So let's say you want to put a person who doesn't handle stress well at your front desk in a busy dental practice. Phil, how's that going to work out?
Oh, well.
Not well. How long is it going to work out for?
Very short period of time.
Right. So maybe if you're lucky, it's a week, 2 weeks, and off they go. They quit, but you never really find out why. So that's one of the critical components. We also measure a whole bunch of other stuff. For example, are they comfortable in a sales role? Well, guess what? That's a treatment coordinator for a lot of people, right?
Oh.
If they are uncomfortable in a sales role and you think they're going to be wonderful as a treatment coordinator, oh boy, your accountant's going to call you in a couple months and say like, hey, Phil, what's going on with your practice? Everything's down. That's the type of concern there. So all of this information we know about the candidate. And at the end of it, we end up knowing more about the candidate than they even knew about themselves. So there's a little bit more, some secret sauce at the end. What we also do is we're looking at how they're motivated, the working environment that they are looking for, and then some very basic questions that are designed to eliminate time-wasting people. So for example, in the consultation call with our team, they're going to ask the doc, what are their hours, right? So Right off the bat, what our software will do is list the hours and the days they're expected to work and ask you, are there any days or times that you're unable to work? That's is asked of the candidate. If they're unable to work those dates or times, they exit our process very gently, because you can have somebody in front of you for an interview through the normal process, tell them that they need to show up for work on these days, and they're like, "That's oh, I won't be able to because my babysitter only lets me go to work from 10 to 2, Tuesdays and Thursdays with a 2-hour lunch." Congrats, right? So you just wasted all your time finding somebody who can work a total of 4 hours a week. It's
Yep.
an extreme example, but we've all been there. So we have 10 different, what we call knockout questions, that are all designed for that. And when this is all said and done, at the bottom of this massive filter pop out a couple of candidates. We send them for a video interview. Our team internally does a video interview for these candidates. And when this is all said and done, they're sent over to the practice to have the practice take a look at them and decide who would be best for their team. Now, with all of that in mind, and keep in mind this is almost completely automated, um, how does that compare to a resume approach? And why do you think that our approach would generate better results?
Well, I mean, I personally think that some of the stuff that you brought up is the fact that you're looking at, multiple aspects. Because I know that from our coaching side, when it comes to the
Yeah.
team and leadership portion of it, it's a very big deal for us to put the people in the right spots, right? So
Hmm.
to someone to sit there and say that she's got a nice personality, I want her to do treatment coordinating, but she doesn't have the ability to, she empathizes or sympathizes, I should say, with everybody.
Right.
She's not the right person to be asking for money. So with what you're saying is exactly kind of what we also coach on is like,
Hmm.
listen, this person isn't in the right seat, so you're finding that out right away. I think that's huge, instead of just like you say, getting those answers right away and deleting them out is a big deal versus going through, because we do have doctors right now that when we're coaching, we're looking for a front desk. Can you help us?
Right.
And they literally will call us and say, well, we're pretty lucky. We got 25 resumes. So can you go through all of those? And you're like, there's just no way that 25 people are going to be all good for this job.
Right.
So I think that's, I guess my question to you is when it comes to these assessments, is this all in one assessment, or are these multiple assessments so that you're also filtering how they're reacting to each assessment?
It's a linear process. And so they start off with the mindset assessment to determine if they have the healthcare mindset. If they get a certain level on that, they continue to the next one. If they don't, they're gently exited out of our process. And that continues through each level until they get to the end. And we're going to, depending on the position, we can reject up to 97% of these candidates. And by the way, all of this is
Wow.
done without the practice having to do any work other than an initial half an hour discussion with our team members. Our software is also working in the middle of the night. It's 24/7. So you would be shocked at how many people are applying for jobs at 2, 3 in the morning. It's remarkable. Even time zone adjusted, it's remarkable. So that's a that's something that is a completely new way to do hiring, because you're just not going to be able to respond like that without somebody helping you. And I wanted to touch on something you just said: getting the right people in the right seats, the right positions in the practice. Internally to our eye care practice, we over the years we have almost exactly 50% of people who apply to position A that don't get position A, we move them internally to a different position. So let's say you're going to apply for a front desk position, and we say, well, that's great, but you would be better suited as, let's say, a dental assistant.
Right.
And by moving them like that, what we found is that about half of people have no clue what they're good at right off the bat. They're applying for the wrong position. Um, the next thing is when you move them from a position that doesn't utilize their strengths and talents naturally to one that does, the retention rate of these people staying in your practice is vastly different because the job's easy for them. It's not a stressful experience if they're just asked to be themselves all day long versus trying to be the proverbial round peg in a square hole and somebody's always talking about getting a bigger hammer to get it in there.
Yep.
These are very different approaches. So what we've found is that by looking at the people on an existing team, we can even use our software to predict which position they would be a better fit for. And again, not
Awesome.
based on resumes at all.
I mean, that's awesome. I mean, because I think when it comes to our coaching too, that's one of the things is making sure not only that they're in the right spot, but I know that when I'm talking with doctors all the time and our coaches get the same thing, it's always, hey, I need a new assistant, need a new hygienist
Right.
because they just left because they got offered a bunch of money and I can't
Mm-hmm.
afford that.
Right.
And it's funny though when I talk to some of these hygienist assistants, front desk people that leave,
Yeah.
why did you leave? It's not ever because of the money. They're like, well, I got offered a lot of money, so I might as well take it.
Right.
But what's the reason why you left? And it's because of the fact of it's either communication, that there was the lack of leadership, or the team itself. And I know that when you and I were talking before, you're weeding that out, and you mentioned it in the very beginning. You're looking for those A players and
Yeah.
stuff, and I think that that's a key thing that I would want you to talk about, because that's huge. Doctors just don't. It's so hard for me when I have those discussions with the doctors, because they roll their eyes every time I say it's not the money. And then there's been a survey out in dental that showed that money was the fifth reason why people
Oh, sure.
leave.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, but you can, it seems to me like when I have those conversations with doctors, I can give them every stat there is known to man, and they still are going to roll their eyes going, she left because she got an extra $3 and I can't afford it. And it's like, that's just not it. So give
Oh
me
boy.
some insight on that.
Yeah, so this is the age-old problem for doctors. And I'm telling you, you are not alone in dentistry. This happens everywhere. Let's zoom out and kind of elevate this discussion to a little bit of a different level. Why does this happen? Well, you mentioned money's the fifth. So what are one, two, three, four, etc.? Some people call it culture, some people call it whatever, but those are amorphic, hard to define things. So as docs, we don't like hard to define things. We like things that fit in a nice box with a bow on it, or at least try to do that. The bigger picture, and you'll see this in any type of high performing organization, you have A players, B players, C players, and God help you if it's further down the line than that. But uh, these are not good people, bad people, or otherwise. Okay, that has nothing to do with it. It's their fit to the role that they're asked to do. So an A player is somebody who is going to be incredibly productive. We all have them in our practice or have had experience with them. They do the work of multiple people. Without them, the practice falls apart, those types of things. How do you keep an A player? A player, this is simple, extraordinarily simple, conceptually hard to do in practice. An A player only wants to work with A players, okay? Not with B players. They'll tolerate them, but if you bring a C player onto an A player team, you're not going to lose the C player, Phil. You're going to lose the A player. The A player is gone. Why? Because the A player can get a job anywhere. They're employable all over the place. And it's not just limited to dentistry per se. One of the things we noticed early on with how the Build My Team process works is that a candidate applying for your dental practices doesn't get up in the morning and think, God, I love teeth. Okay. They don't get up in the morning and think, goodness, I love glasses or eye care. What they want is a position sitting at a desk in front of a computer with air conditioning, stable paycheck, and they know that these paychecks aren't going out of business anytime soon. They're looking for stability. They want their family to be supported. They want a long-term position that they can get good at and grow in and that type of thing. What doesn't matter to them is if it's in dentistry, eye care, chiropractic, general medicine, none of that stuff matters. So, what I like to ask dentists who are listening to this is to to change your mindset a little bit. You're not competing against other dentists per se. You're competing against what I just described. And when you take a look at it that way, it's obviously a much more competitive environment. But what you have to do is change your approach. You need to get more candidates in. And you mentioned earlier, 25 candidates for let's say a front desk position. That's awful. We're looking at a couple hundred for most of the sourcing that we do for folks. And why do we need a couple hundred? Because we're going to land up with a handful of them at the end that we know can do the job, and then we do a video interview to determine if they're a good fit for practices. So by changing that mentality and moving from I'm competing against the practice down the road to let's make this a position where an A player can flourish. If you can get an A player to work with another A player, you got the beginning of a tremendous cohesive group. Okay. And I'll give you an example. This is extreme, but when Frank runs my practice as an executive, and he also runs Build My Team. He's in charge of operations for both. Mm-hmm. The reason we do that is so that when Build My Team, which handles all the hiring for my practice, fills a position, we have to live with this person. Okay, we have to. It's not academic at that point. We have to actually see this all in action. And when he first started, he came from a background of 30 years in banking, made a spreadsheet of each person on the team, green, yellow, red. Okay, this is actually what happened. There's no embellishment whatsoever to this story. The red people, they were not bad people. They're great. They were working in the wrong role. Okay, so those folks were exited from our team, and they're much happier elsewhere doing other things. The yellow, some people were able to tweak their performance a little bit. Some people weren't. The ones that weren't were exited and replaced. We went from 14 people on the team down to 10 and a half, one half-time position. The gross income went up approximately 50%, and our net income almost tripled by dropping almost 4 positions. And you say, how on earth is that possible? I don't believe it. I don't believe a word this guy's saying. Well, not only possible, but on one podcast, I had to back it up with tax returns, obviously offline. But I showed the fellow because he got called on it by his listeners. I said, here we are. This is the explanation to it. It is the complete demonstration of how excellent team members can perform. And you just don't believe that it's possible when you haven't seen it yourself or don't have a mechanism to generate those A players and B plus players. And that's what Build My Team does all day long. So I got to see that live in our practice. And, all these numbers are great, but really great actually, but what is missing is the discussion of stress for the doc. Okay. So dentistry is hard enough on an average day. You guys have it way harder than eye care does. And like Cairo, they get paid in cash almost all the time, for crying out loud. They don't even have to deal with insurances, right? So there's a my heart goes out to folks in dentistry because it's challenging to begin with. Now, if you take that role and you bring on these A players and you put them on the bus, put them in the right seats on the bus, then your job, your role as an owner changes. Guess what, Phil? You're not driving the bus anymore. What your job to do is to find a map. First of all, find a destination, create a map, and then you get out of the way. You let them drive the bus. One caveat, you always put guardrails on the road.
Right.
Yep. Always put the guardrails on, but you get out of the way and you let them drive the bus. You will never believe how great they are as bus drivers until you see that happening. And it's something that you can't do with the C players on the team because the bus will get a flat tire, crash, roll over. It'll be some horrible thing on the 9 o'clock news. When you have those A players and the B plus players, you have a team that can do that. And all it requires from your listeners is the mindset, just a switch in their mindset that the old way that they've been doing this just doesn't produce results that are good enough. And that's that's the whole purpose of what Build My Team does and how we're able to do it. Because it's just not enough to say we can do this. That's a sales pitch. It's the how, the understanding of why this is so predictable and outputs these A players.
I agree 100%. And I think that what I've been hearing, and I hope everybody else that's listening is hearing as well, is the fact that what you are doing is bringing in that leadership, that team concept into the hiring process, which I think is exactly what you're saying is just uh, the different way of looking at things, a different mindset, but it is absolutely, because I always have doctors that will look at me and say, man, I don't know how he's doing it over there. You know, he's
Mm-hmm.
got less team members than I do, and he's killing it. And I
Right.
always tell them all the time is every time you see somebody like that, that's because their team and the
Mm-hmm.
the core values, everything's built out, the vision for the practice, everybody's a part of it, everybody is bought into that concept.
Right.
And that's basically in a nutshell what you're saying is, you know, you have to change that mindset, and you
You
have
do.
to go into this mindset, Build My Team, to be able to have exactly that. And then that's what I always say, those guys never have pressure. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they come in, they're enjoying their job, they want to
Right.
be business owners. Because I would say probably the second biggest thing that I always get from doctors is, I just don't want to run the business anymore, I just want to be a
Mm-hmm.
dentist. And it's
Right.
always that, it's always, once you have that 30-minute to hour conversation, it's
Yeah.
always just like you're saying, they're dealing with all the stressors, but all those stressors are very fixable if you want to change your mindset, um, and get out of that, what I always say, that 2-inch hole that they're used to working in, right? There's just
Right.
that big hole that they're used to working, and
Yeah.
they just they don't work on the surrounding stuff, you know, outside of that.
Of course.
So
Yeah. Imagine if your stressors are somebody else's exciting challenges. Wow, what a concept, right? This is the core of the changes that happened to my team. The stuff that I couldn't stand doing was moved to somebody who gets excited about doing it. The stuff that I was awful at, which is a tremendous amount, was moved to team members who are terrific at it. And I just want to mention one thing here. As dentists and practice owners, we are under immense, colossal pressure that's relentless on any given day for a whole bunch of reasons, but one of them in particular is to appear that we know exactly what we're doing at all times and are fantastic at it. I have news for all of us. No, we are not fantastic at everything. We were trained to do a super specific, incredibly valuable role within society that we're extremely well compensated for, but we are experts at a very, very narrow niche of of taking care of people. Now, it doesn't mean that we're fantastic at everything else. It means we're fantastic at that very narrow niche. What we need to do is bring people in who are fantastic at the stuff we're not good at, which is most things. And it's okay to not be good at most things. Like, it's almost like it's a cathartic discussion where there's so much pressure that's on the owner to be amazing at all this stuff. But let's face it, you can't be. You can't be amazing at all of that and be amazing at a dentist and sleep. Pick two, but you can't have three. You know that old adage, right?
yes,
Or you can't do that and have a family that still talks to you, because you're going to be working 20 hours a day trying to understand things like the intricacies of billing, the intricacies of insurance regulations. I mean, you name it. It's hard enough to keep up with just how to be a great dentist. And so you take a step back, like you mentioned, those folks that have those amazing teams that just seem to glow and float along in life, it's because of the team. If you don't believe me, here's an easy exercise to do. Walk through your front door as if you're a patient, count the number of interactions you have with a human in the practice, and then at the end of that, look at the percentage of how many times you were that human. And what you'll end up coming up with is a bit of a knock in the head, and you say, "Holy cow! I'm the one that does all the, the dental side of things, and I'm a fraction, a tiny fraction of the interactions that a patient has in this practice." The translation here is that the team is providing the healthcare. They're providing the dentistry care to the patient. You're getting the credit for it because you deserve it, but they're the ones providing almost all the interactions with the patient. It's why when you get a bad Google review, how many times is it actually the doctor's fault? Right? I mean,
Right.
the dentist, how many times? Fraction, tiny amounts of times. It's always about the team. And that's because the team is being measured far more than you are. It's also the reason why those dentists that are floating around with stress-free days, they have focused their time and effort on excellent hiring, getting those A players on board, and having them be the ones that produce this experience for the patients. It's how the magic is made for those types of practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so very, very impactful stuff. What I've got probably like 10 customers right now that I'm thinking that have reached out to me about hirings. What do we do, or what do they do to start working with Build My Team?
Super easy. Go to buildmyteam.com, schedule a consultation call. That's how it all starts. And the consultation call, this is important. The reason we do a phone call is we want to actually hear what's going on in the practice. It's time to
Mm,
air out open the closets, look under the rug for that big pile that nobody's talking about, like air out all the skeletons. We've heard everything. And so what
that's
we
right.
want to do is to make sure that our team members, that when they're talking to a practice, that you tell us exactly what's going on, because the more we know about your practice, the better our fits are with these candidates. Okay. The second thing is it's about a half an hour discussion on the phone. So this is not an arduous thing by any means. And then the only thing that we require moving forward is that you're very responsive to our team. When we send an A player candidate over, you gotta hop on them. That's it. This is not a take a week to get back to somebody.
Right.
You move very quickly because an A player is gone, as we talked about earlier. So those are the only two real requirements that we're looking for. Our team will write the job description, post it everywhere. We do everything after that. So a candidate or a practice can hire somebody with Build My Team, believe it or not, with less than an hour's worth of work. We do this all the time. And that time savings is obviously magical to a
Yeah.
practice, but we're also going to be able to produce those much higher quality candidates, as I've said. This is not an expensive service by any means. It's far less than what it's costing you to do yourself. And what we're looking for are practices that want to make this jump to a better way of doing things and have us handle their as much of the role filling as they're comfortable with. And that's what we do.
So
So it all starts at buildmyteam.com.
so one quick question, and
Mm-hmm.
then we'll call it quits here. But since you mentioned that, and you're doing that 30-minute consultation, do you ever have uh consultations where you refuse the customer because of the fact that you know that they're not going to accept your way of doing things? Because to me it seems like when you said that, I know that with my business that I
Yeah.
have that I have to tell doctors we're not a fit for you because
Yep.
you're not gonna listen.
Well, Phil, that's pretty astute of you. But remember what we do for a living. We're selecting candidates. We only do one thing over and over and over exceptionally well. The other side of that is we're making sure that we're a great fit for the practice. If you are not a great fit, uh, I'm sorry, if we're not a great fit, then we are not working together. We
Okay.
will not take your money. Nope, nope, nope. All it leads to is this has happened to us a couple times in the past. It leads to problems. And when when we work with a practice that strongly believes in the strengths and talents approach, the natural strengths and talents, we make magic for the practice. It's incredibly predictable. It's
Mm-hmm.
straightforward. Um, so, for example, if you want candidates only from the dental industry profession and only have experience, we are not a fit for you. We have no way to do that. We're not interested in doing that. Instead, we'll bring these candidates to the table that learn super quickly. By the way, that translation here is you don't have to try and get rid of their bad habits. They're not bringing those bad habits to the table.
Right.
So all you have to do is train them on the right way to do it, which takes a fraction of the time of trying to undo bad habits. And the other thing is we do not do this for licensed positions. So we do not find doctors. And in the States, I mean, I think all states have to be dental hygienist licensed, but other positions that don't require licenses, that's what we focus on. And
Okay.
we're, like I said, that we do one thing exceptionally well over and over again.
Well, that was going to be my other question is how do you handle
Mm-hmm.
the licensing of those things? But that was answered there. But I will say one of the major things that we have right now, front desk. Everybody,
Right. Mm-hmm.
everybody talks about that at all times. So um
And
I
that's one
I
of the
love it.
easier positions to fill because a front desk position in dentistry is virtually identical to eye care, to chiro, to medical, to audiology. It doesn't matter where. It's the same role with a different wrapper on it. And we've hired umpteen number of front desk people. They're going when they come through our system, they're going to stay much longer. That's something we
Yep.
don't talk about enough. Why do they stay? Because it's a natural fit to their talents and strengths. Um, they when with that natural fit, again, they just wake up in the morning, they do what they do naturally, and they go home at the end of the day, and they're not really sure why everybody thinks their job is what they're doing is special because it's just them being them.
Wow. I tell you, this was for me was awesome because I just think
Same.
that it's a perfect fit for everything that we run into. It fits with our coaching style
Hmm.
as well. Just like I said, to take that next level and switch that mindset to get into finding the right person. And I think that's one of the things too. Since you mentioned that with the front desk, there's too many doctors that feel they have to have that dental experience. And I always say the same thing. If
Right.
you hire the right person, that right person will be trained the right way and then will have good habits. And I feel like I'm just repeating what you say because you're saying exactly what I kind of preach to
Well,
them. And it's important.
yeah, imagine you you go the route two different paths, right? The with experience and without experience. The without experience, you tell them exactly how to do what they need to do, and they
Right.
do it because they're coachable. The with experience, the first thing out of the mouth is, "Oh, well, we didn't do it that way at Dr. Jones's practice."
Right.
Well, you're not at Dr. Jones's practice.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But you're fighting that battle all the time. And so and we've measured this. There's the short period of time it takes to get somebody through the Build My Team system up and running and trained. And then there's that period of time plus the additional period of time of trying to get the experienced person to unlearn what they're doing. And these are not equivalent periods of time, not even close. In the Build My Team process, if somebody comes in with experience, because we do look at the resumes at the very end, it's a red flag. This is something that has to be looked at manually to see if that person would cause problems or not. I'll give you an example. Candidate looks great. Everything's fantastic. They interview exceptionally well. And by the way, in the last 10 years, they've been in 6 dental practices. Anybody concerned about that? Of course, we are. That would be something that would be brought up immediately. So there's just a lot of downsides to that type of experience. It doesn't mean that you can't have a stupendous candidate, an A player with experience. And boy, oh boy, those do come across occasionally. And our Build My Team consultants, they're on our clients' cases to get them in immediately to talk to them. But it's pretty rare.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thanks for coming
Thank
on.
you, Phil.
It
Yeah.
was a great time, and I hope that the people listening see how important it is to change that mindset, because it is one of those things that when they do change that mindset, that light bulb does go off, and it's just like, wow, I wish I would have done this a long time ago. So
Right.
thanks so much, Michael, for being on. And
Thank you,
we
Phil.
will definitely make sure that if anybody wants his help, remember, build my team sounds everything exactly the way that we need to be hiring people. So try them out. If you enjoy our show, please rate us on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Phil Cole. Once again, we had Build My Team on with us today. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.